I'm Dave Baker.
And I'm Andrew Price.
Welcome to Deep Cuts, the podcast where we pick a topic and walk you through the ins, the outs, and the nitty-gritty, so that you can appear like an interesting and idiosyncratic person at your next forced social function. Today's topic is...
the Mona Lisa.
What is the Mona Lisa? Well, it's widely considered the greatest work by the master polymath Leonardo DaVinci. But what if we told you that it wasn't always this way, and it was just a painting that was fine until it was stolen and the media circus surrounding it changed the art world forever? Act 1. Every empire starts with a crime. To this day, no one knows exactly who the Mona Lisa is a portrait of. We think it's a portrait of Lisa Gherardini, a noblewoman and the wife of Francesco del Giocondo. The exact year of origin is also unknown. We think it's a painting that was created sometime between 1503 and 1506. It was eventually bought by the French King Francis I. It is on display in the Louvre in Paris, and it has been since 1719. Have you ever seen the Mona Lisa, Andrew?
No. I mean, as of right now, I would have.
Because you guys were going to go to Europe?
Yes.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. Where were you going to go before the pandemic fucked everything?
We were going to go all around. I mean, we were going to go to Paris. We were going to go to Italy. We were going to go to Switzerland. We were going to go to the UK. Just a bunch of random stuff.
I have seen the Mona Lisa, and it was not really what I was expecting. I don't even know really what I was expecting, but it's so weird when something is so overhyped and so iconic, and you see it in all these art books, and like I literally had to write a paper on it in art school, and like going and seeing, it's not very big. It's very, very small, very just kind of I mean, by definition, it is a painting, but for some reason, standing in front of a Rothko or like a big Andy Warhol or, some of these more, the dimensions communicate something about the piece where, like the Mona Lisa is like from the top of my head to my chest. It's very small. Like you're looking at it and you're like, oh wow, this is the painting everybody's really excited about. All right.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into this, but it wasn't made with the intention of it being anything other than just a painting that some guy made.
Some guy, Leonardo da Vinci, some guy.
Well, I mean, to him, he was some guy.
Yeah.
Fine art, or specifically paintings. It's kind of strange what they've come to represent in culture. It's just a very strange medium to have become so important in the way that it is. It's just very fascinating how culture evolves in those ways. Where like in the United States, like movies became the dominant form of pop culture. That's just like the main thing is movies. And paintings, as well as other fine art, sculptures and pottery and things like that, they occupied this space as like this omnipotent, important art, more than any other form of art. It's very fascinating how the evolution of that has come to pass.
Today, the Mona Lisa is estimated to be worth somewhere north of $650 million. It is commonly referred to as the apex of artistic achievement in Western culture. It is considered the greatest painting, but the greatest of the old masters. So, how did this painting gain such fame and value? It probably always was just this way, right? Like, it's the greatest painting ever made. It was probably just instantly heralded as such. Leonardo da Vinci painted it, and he's famous, so the painting must have just been immediately world-renowned. Wrong. So how did this change? If not Da Vinci, is there another single person that could be credited with propelling the Mona Lisa into the stratosphere of human culture? A man named Vincenzo Perugia? Perugia? Shit. Vincenzo Perugia? Yes?
My main dude, Vincenzi.
Born on October 8th, 1881 in Italy, Perugia worked as an artist for most of his life. However, when he turned 30, he decided to commit a crime that would forever alter the art world. He decided he was going to steal the Mona Lisa. In August of 1911, Perugia would carry out what is widely considered the greatest art theft in human history. After surveilling the security setup of the Louvre, he purchased a white smock that was used by the museum as its employees' uniform. And he just walked into the museum on August 21st at 7 a.m. with the rest of the workers entering the premises. He proceeded to the Salon Carré, where the Mona Lisa hung. He waited until no one was in the room with him, and then he just took it off the wall. He then quickly went into a service stairwell, where he took the painting out of its frame, placing the wood panel inside his rolled up worker's smock. It just doesn't sound real. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the thing about art theft. It's like a really strange world. Several years ago, I got like obsessed with reading about art theft. I don't know why, but I got a bunch of books about it. And I read a bunch of books about different famous art thefts, and then also a couple of famous art thieves, which there are very few of. Yeah. It's so fascinating, and it's so like every example of art theft is as strange as this. They are like simultaneously they're simultaneously these kind of like romantic, like almost cinematic type thefts, where they're just like in every example of it, it's never like, oh, I just wanted to steal art and like make money on it. It's always been this like weird romantic thing where the thief has this strange ideal of like what it means to steal this piece of art. It's always imbued with this sort of gravitas like that. But then simultaneously, the theft is always really mundane. And it literally always involves somebody just casually strolling into a place and just taking it and nobody notices. And
it's just so crazy too, because like I've fucking been in the Louvre, man. Like it's huge. And at one point you're like, I can totally understand how people could just be in here and then just take something and leave.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it's like there's so many docents and security guards and checkpoints and just people in general. Like, I mean, yeah, he went in before the place opened, but even so, like, it's just so crazy. And the fact that they were just like, yeah, everybody's just wearing smocks, no bigs, no like security clearance, no badges. Just like, are you wearing a white toga looking thing? Nope, no bigs, bro.
I mean, I think it was still even this way as recently as like the 80s, but especially back then. I think the reason why these thefts tend to be so like weirdly casual is because just nobody ever assumes that art is going to get stolen. And there's this weird feedback loop that leads to it, where the interesting thing about art theft is that it's very rarely done because it's nearly impossible to resell art. And we'll get to, I'll bring this up again later on when we kind of get into the thing, but it's nearly impossible to successfully steal art. And because it's nearly impossible, it's very rarely done. So nobody expects it. So museums and other places that exhibit art basically just always have their guard down because of this. And so when the thefts happen, they are literally just a guy walking in with a smock and stealing it and then walking out casually because of this feedback loop.
I mean, it's funny because, like, you know, in the 2000s, that's basically what Banksy was doing, you know? He was just, like, walking into galleries and, like, vandalizing paintings or putting his own paintings that are, like, spoof paintings or, you know, whatever. Just, like, walking in with a fucking giant canvas, stapling it to the fucking wall and then walking the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might have actually been part of what kind of got me fascinated in it, was watching Exit Through the Gift Shop. And you know, whatever you think about the, you know, there's a lot of speculation about like how much of that movie is like a mockumentary and how much of it is real, and like how much of a real person versus a character Mr. Brainwash is. But like there really is that one shot that shows Banksy walk into that museum and then just go up and stick his painting on the wall. And like, there's a bunch of people around him and nobody notices.
Yeah.
He just does it. And that shot alone just really fascinated me. And yeah, there's just something so strange about the dichotomy between how elevated and sort of prestigious fine art is versus like how casual these like crimes are. That's just endlessly fascinating to me.
It's kind of the same social contract. Like there's an invisibility that surrounds all of these subjects of like the idea that money holds value is a social contract. The idea that fine art is worth an exorbitant amount of money is a social contract. The fact that nobody's taking the art off the wall, which 9 times out of 10 is like, you know, to be blunt, like an older person who's like retired, just like hanging out. Like they're not going to really be able to stop anybody. Like if 2 guys with a single snub-nosed 35 walked in there, they would leave with millions of dollars worth of fine art. You know what I mean?
Which has happened.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
that was basically what happened with the infamous Gardner Museum theft.
I don't think I know that one. Which one was that one?
So there's a museum, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. It's in Boston, Massachusetts. So basically this museum was started by Isabella Stewart Gardner, who is a rich person, for sure.
For sure.
But,
I think that goes without saying for most people in the art world. Yeah.
She was an art. Isabella Stewart Gardner was an art collector who lived from 1840 to 1924, philanthropist and a patron of the arts. And she commissioned this museum to house a number of famous works of art, most notably a painting called The Concert by Vermeer. And in the 90s, somebody just waltzed in and stole a bunch of stuff from it. And they basically did it in that way. They walked in with a mask and a gun, and they just took what they needed. And there was basically a very specific instructions in Isabella Stewart Gardner's will about how the museum would be handled after her death. And the stipulations in her will were that no art could ever be put into or taken out of the museum. She wanted it basically to be preserved as it was forever, as long as it was being funded by her estate. And so there's very strict legal stipulations that dictate that they cannot ever remove art from it, and they can never put new art into it. And because of this, there is just sections of the museum that are just basically they're basically just crime scenes of these other pieces of art that have been stolen because they can't replace them. So you can go into the museum, you can see all these other pieces of art, but then there are just random places where there's just nothing.
That's awesome.
And just empty easels and empty spots on the wall where they just legally can't replace the stolen artwork. And it is it's easily one of the most notorious art thefts in history, alongside this story, because nobody knows who has the art. Nobody knows who stole it. It's never been recovered. There's been a lot of conspiracy theories and a lot of there's even a conspiracy theory that Banksy did it. Like there's just all these conspiracy theories. And nobody's ever figured it out. And it's very rare because, as I want to talk about a little later when we get into more of the specific story points, there are very few art thefts that actually result in a piece of art that goes missing forever and is never recovered.
Yeah, I mean, this one lasted a significant amount of time, but we'll get to that in a second. He then quickly went to the service staircase, where he took the painting out of its frame, placing the wood panel inside his rolled-up worker's smock. He then strolled down the worker's entrance and out, just the way he came in. He left the premises of the Louvre. The fact that the painting had been stolen was not noticed until the next day, when the artist Louis Barraud came to the museum with the intention of sketching it and the other old master paintings for artistic study. Initially, the staff of the Louvre told everyone that the painting was being photographed, and it was just thought to be out on loan to a photographer. Then, they quickly realized that this was not true. The Louvre closed for a week while the staff attempted to get to the bottom of what was happening. The French poet Guillaume Apollinaire was suspected to have stolen the painting. The media fever pitch for a culprit was so intense that Apollinaire was actually imprisoned for the crime while being held against his will. Despite not being the actual perpetrator, Apollinaire fingered his friend and contemporary Pablo Picasso as the mastermind.
And, you know, once again, it's so crazy and surreal that that is a thing. That like for a while, Pablo Picasso was a suspect in this crime. And you're just like, how is that possible? Like, it feels like the Avengers, where you're just like, all these characters are crossing paths in this. But once again, the art world is so small and it's so rare that this kind of thing happens that, like, it actually is much more plausible that he did do it than in any other scenario, in any other type of art or any other field.
And also, Picasso was an asshole.
Yeah.
That's also a mitigating factor here. Like, if you had told me, like, oh yeah, Picasso stole all these paintings, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
That guy was a dick. Yeah, sure, I believe it. Yeah, I love stories like this where, you know, before security cameras were prevalent, before the internet was around, before fucking Excel spreadsheets were everywhere. I love when things like fall through the cracks in this way. Like, there's so many stories about like people lying their way into jobs. Like, George Lazenby was an Australian model who lied his way into getting the job of James Bond. He said he was an actor in movies in Japan and Germany, and they were just like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, you say you did that, so you probably did. Or like Orson Welles lied his way into basically a career as a Broadway director because he was like, yeah, I was a part of a really acclaimed Broadway a theater production company in Ireland where I was just living. And yeah, I should definitely be running this Broadway theater company because I just did it.
Yeah, like how I lied my way into this podcast by being like, yeah, I love the Hardai Boys.
Nancy Drow?
Yeah. I mean,
I love Nancy Drow.
I'm still wondering why that didn't serve as a red flag to you, but yeah.
I mean,
my point is I get it.
Yeah, you're living proof that the only qualification you need in life is for the internet to not be readily accessible to the person interviewing you and for you to have unshakable confidence, which you do. So you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it gets harder and harder every year. But it's still a thing. Social engineering is very fascinating to me as well. And I think that's probably more to do with why I'm so fascinated with this art theft stuff, is because it is just people getting by on just waltzing into a room and just they're supposed to be there, and that's what everyone believes because that's exactly how they present themselves, and you know they have that unshakable confidence, and they're able to bluff and get away with things. And you know, this thing more than anything else is really just dependent on that. And there's so many examples of that where people are able to just waltz into a room and pretend like they're supposed to be there and then just walk out with hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars worth of art.
So crazy. And on that note, act break. Act 2, 2 years of waiting. Picasso was brought in and questioned, but not arrested. Eventually, both men were exonerated. You might be asking yourself, how was it that the Mona Lisa was so easy to steal? Even if getting into the building was so easy, how was it that Bruguera knew how he could even take the painting off of the wall? Well, the answer to that is pretty simple. He was the man who built the frame and installed the painting in the Louvre, which kind of seems like somebody that you would like immediately talk to, even if it was just to be like, hey, bro, we just got our painting stolen. How the fuck is this possible?
Yeah.
Like you feel like you would bring that guy in immediately just to like give you feedback on what happened.
Yeah.
Apparently 1911 just operating under a different standard.
Yeah, I mean no background checks on the frame builders.
Yeah.
Where's Inspector Clouseau?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Where's that Interpol agent from Lupin the Third? Where's the crack French detective to get to the bottom of this? Where's Chuchi Wuchi? That's what I want to know.
Where is Choochie Woochie? The Mona Lisa remained in Pughera's possession for close to 2 years. During this time, there was a massive media circus surrounding the painting.
Inspector Zenigata. That's his name.
Yeah.
For all you nerds
Lupo
out
the
there,
Third.
I knew it.
Yeah.
I didn't Google that. I remembered.
During this time, there was a massive media circus surrounding the painting. At one point, a newspaper ran a headline that claimed over 60 detectives were working around the clock to attempt to regain the painting. That's crazy to me. It's so weird.
It's the same thing where the art is so held in high regard that they're just like, we have to find this.
But at this point, the art isn't even held in that high regard. It's like a cool painting.
Well, not
but
this
it's
painting specifically, but just art is so important to the French that they're just like they've got the police chief from Leon the Professional being like, bring me everyone. Everyone. and yet somebody just walked in and grabbed it. Like, it's just such a weird, like, cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. And also, like, you can it's interesting how history repeats itself, where you can, just even in those 2 sentences of, there was this big media circus surrounding the painting, and at one point, at the height of the fervor around it, a paper ran a story saying 60 detectives were looking for it at once. That sounds like something that would happen right now. Yeah. That sounds like, we're in this very extreme polarized era, which, World War I is about to happen, right? World War I happens in 1914, right? Yeah. Yeah. World War I's about to happen. There's massive industrial change happening. Like, the world is fundamentally shifting on that turn of the century in the same way that it's changing right now. And it's so crazy how it's basically the same, but also completely fucking different.
Also, I want to do a police procedural called 60 Detectives, where each episode focuses on, similar to a Law and Order or CSI, it focuses on one specific crime. Yeah. But in every episode, they put 60 different detectives on that one crime, and then we intercut between all 60 of them. Each one of them.
Yeah. But also, instead of the boom boom, it would just be one of the French detectives going, ha ha.
Yes. And each episode is 5 hours long.
Yeah. Yeah. Needless to say, the hubbub surrounding the missing painting caused its fame to grow and catapulted it into being the greatest painting of all time, in air quotes. Why would Perugia steal this painting that was, at the time he stole it, not the greatest painting in the world? Well, the commonly held belief is that he was an Italian patriot who believed that the painting should be returned to Italy. However, as the media circus grew and grew and grew, he became reticent to let the painting leave his possession, because money is a hell of a thing.
He was like an Italian Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
This painting belongs in a different museum.
This painting, it belongs in a museum until I realize how much it's going to be worth, and then I just keep it in my house. This is where we get it canceled, right here with these voices.
Also, my inappropriate relationship with my college student is just glossed over, but very strange.
With him?
There's that scene in Indiana Jones where one of his students closes their eyes.
Yes, close. Yeah. I thought you were making a joke about Vincenzo, my boy Vinny. I was like, what? My boy Vinny? Fucking underage people?
Maybe we get canceled, but not Vinny.
Yeah, not Vinny, man. I'll die for Vinny.
Yeah.
At a certain
Vinny's
point,
like the Simpsons.
Yeah, I can't fucking pronounce his name, but goddamn, I feel such an allegiance towards him for no reason. At a certain point, though, he grew impatient and attempted to sell the painting to Giovanni Poggi. Poggi? P-O-G-G-I? Giovanni Poggi. Fuck it, whatever. At a certain point, he became...
You said Giovanni with such confidence, and then you lost it.
Poggi? I don't know, man. At a certain point, he grew impatient at the attempt and attempted to sell the painting to Giovanni Poggi, the director of the
I gotta say, maybe I'm gonna get canceled for this, but Italian words sound like a kid making up Italian words.
I mean, maybe the best part is what if I wrote all of these words wrong? You know what I mean? Like I'm like the Uffizi Gallery in Florence that belonged to Giovanni Poggi.
You definitely spelled Perugia 3 different ways.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Throughout this whole thing.
Yeah,
I don't know which one's the right one.
Poggi worked with authorities to catch our boy Vinny. However, part of his stipulations for aiding the police was that he wanted to be able to exhibit the Mona Lisa for 2 weeks in his gallery. So guess what? Our boy Vinny got busted for 2 years. 2 years with this shit.
And once again, this is genuinely how 99% of art thefts end. Because the art world, even back then, is so insular and it's so small that if you steal a piece of, I mean, number one, if you steal a piece of art, it's kind of the dumbest thing you could steal, because you steal money and like, yeah, money is marked and money has serial numbers or whatever, but there's ways around that. And also you have to be, you have to be a little bit smarter to catch that. If you were on the receiving end of stolen money, you'd have to be like, I should get these serial numbers scanned, and and it's not as inherently suspicious for somebody to give you money, because money is just a currency that people pay for things with. But art is kind of just a dumb thing to try to steal for monetary gain, because by definition, anybody who would want it knows what it is.
Yeah.
And so they know that it was stolen. And so 99% of art thefts end with the person finally just like basically saying fuck it and getting careless. They can't find anybody who's interested in it. They've tried to sell it on the black market unsuccessfully because nobody wants it, because anybody who knows what it is knows that it's stolen and wants nothing to do with it. And anybody who doesn't know what it is has no idea what the true value of it is.
Yeah.
They finally get careless and they just find somebody, usually an art dealer, who's interested in buying it. The art dealer either buys it or is about to buy it. And then they just go and tell the police. They're just like, this guy is trying to sell me this fucking painting that was just stolen. It's literally how all art thefts basically end.
Except in comics, when pages get stolen in comics, and then it just never ends well, and people just lose work, and it just never comes back. It's really sad and depressing.
And that's even more that's kind of just you're proving your own point. Your own thing that you say all the time is just the reason for that is because the average Joe, if they see a Kirby page, they're just like, know. It's just what is this comic book stuff? Yeah,
exactly. That's a really good impersonation of me doing an impersonation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So our boy Vinny, he gets busted and he goes to prison. And he, I know you can read in the outline, but for the sake of this improv, any guesses on how long you would think someone who stole the fucking Mona Lisa went to prison for?
140 years.
140 years. You would be off by 139 years and 6 months. Our boy Vinny P got fucking 6 months in prison.
The saddest part about that is the math that you had to do in your head to say that I could see in your eyes, the math that you were doing.
But yeah, he got fucking 6 months. So why would our boy Vinny P get 6 months in prison for stealing one of the, now at this point, most prized paintings in the planet, in the history of art? Because everybody loved that he was an Italian folk hero, basically. They all loved that his justification was that he stole it because the painting deserved to be in Italy.
Yeah, it's like a Bonnie and Clyde situation.
It's amazing. It's like Robin Hood, but way lower stakes or higher stakes, I guess, depending on your point of view on that. He basically became like an Italian folk hero for a minute, and he was hailed for his patriotism and convictions for bringing the Mona Lisa back to Italy. Pughera's own fame spawned a branching web of people looking to co-opt his narrative, though. And who's to say that they weren't involved or were involved? But all it really ends up being is just like a weird mess of people being like, I was there too. Eduardo de Valleferino, the famed thief and con man, claimed that he actually masterminded the operation. The original plan was that the famed art forger Yves Chaudron was to have created 6 copies of the painting, and the group, all 3 of them, would auction these off sporadically over the course of many years, basically milking a private collector's pool, telling everybody that they had the original Mona Lisa, when in fact, obviously they would make these 6 copies and they would keep the original for themselves, and, continually duping the public over and over again. His account of the heist and his purported involvement was published in a story in the Saturday Evening Post in 1932, which is, if you're keeping track, 21 years later after the whole situation had kind of resolved after the initial heist.
And once again, all of these art thefts, they all tend to have this conspiracy theory, almost like JFK level conspiracy culture around them, that just seemingly tends to ring throughout all the different art thefts that have happened throughout history. Similar to this, the Isabella Stewart Gardner theft, there's all kinds of conspiracy theories about who was involved with it or who did it, and a lot of different people who have like either taken credit for it or people who have said that other people have done it. And they've basically been like, well, I'm not saying I didn't do it. And there's just that whole zeitgeist around it. There's a famous art thief that I want to do an episode about. His name is Miles J. Connor, and he and
if you're paying attention at home, Miles J. Connor is actually an anagram for Andrew Price.
We just do the episode and then we just end up like it's some weird like twist ending where we just slowly discover, or you slowly discover that it's me, and then I just disappear from the country. But yeah, a lot of people believe that he was responsible. He denies it though.
I love it. I love this shit. Like the like art forgery in general. I love what's his name? Elmire, the most famous art forger. That guy's so silly. I love that dude. If you've never seen the documentary F for Fake, highly recommended. It's a Orson Welles documentary all about art thievery and art forgery and the kind of like charlatanism that's necessary when you're involved in any sort of artistic pursuit. One of my favorite movies ever made. So if you haven't seen it, go watch F for Fake. It's really, really good. Thank you for the support, Andrew.
Yep. The reason why I said that is because the connection dropped for a second, so I didn't hear anything you said. Except for F for Fake is a great movie, and then I just said, "Yep."
It's even better. I love it. The surrounding insanity that spiraled up after the Mona Lisa was recovered really only got even weirder with time. On December 30th, a Bolivian man named Hugo Uganza Viergas threw a rock at the Mona Lisa as hard as he could, shattering the glass that kept it safe. Thankfully, the painting was mostly unharmed, aside from a speck of pigment that was jogged loose on the Mona Lisa's left eyebrow. The reason that it was encased in glass at the time was because before our boy Hugo, a man had run at the painting with a razor blade, attempting to cut a chunk out of it free so that he could have it, because he claimed that he was in love with the painting.
Yeah, I mean, that guy's insane, but these attempts at defacing art like this, I find them to be really interesting as well, because they feel like genuine pieces of performance art. I mean, that guy was just insane. But as we kind of have been talking about and sort of laying track for, art, and I definitely want to discuss this way more in depth later on in the discussion portion. But
Act 3 discussion.
Yes, art is imbued with this almost like. It's imbued with this importance that is dictated by a number of different elements that aren't always necessarily about the actual art, and more about a bunch of different other outside factors. And, much like, kind of the stuff that Banksy was doing of just like walking into museums and sticking up his art. Like whenever Banksy did that, you could think about it like, oh, just a weird prank. But, it's kind of profound what he did, because he was basically kind of just like demystifying the concept of a piece of art being important. Because he's just like, I can just come in here and stick this on the wall and nobody fucking notices. Because this whole thing is just kind of bullshit. And there was that thing that happened most recently where there was an avant-garde artist who had a art installation that was a banana taped to a wall. Yeah. And then a different avant-garde artist went into the gallery and ate the banana. And like and there's video of it, he just walks up and there's a crowd around him, and then he just walks up and takes the banana off the wall and then just eats it, and everybody gasps. And like, it's funny and kind of absurd, but it's also kind of a profound statement to have that amount of self-reference to your own art form and just be like, I'm out there, I'm doing these avant-garde pieces of performance art, but like, it's just a fucking banana. Like, I'm just gonna walk in here and eat it. Like,
and all of these guys that we're talking about, whether it's Banksy or the banana artist or the guy who ate the banana, like they're all descendant from Marcel Duchamp, right? They're all descendant from his piece Art Mutt, which, if you're not familiar with it, Art Mutt's, I think it's called The Fountain, maybe, or Untitled. I don't remember the actual name of it, but basically, Marcel Duchamp was an artist who was a painter who then got really into conceptual and performance art, and he submitted a piece to a very famous show where he took a urinal and just put it in the show, and that was his piece. And he claimed that it was art. He didn't change it at all, other than writing a pseudonym on it. He claimed that he put R. Mutt, which was his his hypothetical persona, performance art persona for this piece. Yeah. And it's that piece was a big like turning point in the art world, where things shifted away from exercises in craft and exercises in skill and exercises in an ability to crystallize time down into a single moment, which is what most paintings, whether they're literally trying to replicate reality or, fragmented and abstractly replicate some sort of feeling or emotion into what it is, onto a piece of canvas. Like that was at that point in time outdated. As soon as Marcel Duchamp was just like, yeah, fuck you guys. This is all bullshit. Your cults of persona are stupid. Like, all of this is meaningless. I'm going to be the most nihilistic and the most impetulant and the most neener that I possibly can by just literally putting a fucking toilet in the middle of this show. And I'm going to wag my nose and my finger at the establishment and say that is art, because art is all about context, and art is all about repositioning something into through a lens where we are all looking at it as something more than it inherently is, which I vacillate between hating and loving. I kind of loathe Marcel Duchamp, and I also kind of love Marcel Duchamp. And all of this stuff is kind of a similar deconstruction of the idea that human attention is what generates value. The social construct, the social contract and construct that we've all agreed upon is what produces the value in this work. And so inherently, regardless of what it is, as long as there's a human eyeball looking at it, it's worthy.
Yeah, and that's like a lot. It's like you said. They're all descendants of this channel of thinking. It's very similar to much of what Banksy does. Whether it's like the time that he was selling original Banksies like at some random stand in like Brooklyn or something like that for like $20 a piece. Yeah. And they were being sold as prints of Banksy works, but they were actually original Banksy works. Or the whole thing he did recently where he had that painting that was set to like, as soon as it sold at auction, it was set to like auto
disintegrate or destroy itself.
Auto shred. Yeah. Or kind of the whole movie of Exit Through the Gift Shop, where, you know, a lot of people speculate that the whole character in the movie was not real. And
yeah, if you haven't seen Exit Through the Gift Shop, it's a documentary directed by Banksy about when Banksy and a bunch of the graffiti guys were coming up in the 90s. There was and 90s and the 2000s, there was a dude named Terry who followed them all around and videotaped them. So he has footage of Shepard Fairey, you know, putting up Obey wheat pastes when he's like, you know, 21 or whatever. He has footage of Invader putting up the little, you know, 16-bit tiles when he's like 25 or whatever. And like, he was just a friend of a lot of these guys when the, in air quotes, street art movement, God, I fucking hate that term, but when they were all kind of coming up. So Banksy kind of struck a deal with him, and because Terry decided that he was going to stop kind of being a documentarian and he was going to go launch his own artistic career and be an artist himself. And so Banksy took a bunch of this footage that Terry had and followed him around recording new footage. And Terry made this artistic persona called Mr. Brainwash, where he makes kind of really bad derivative work that's all it's Warhol, Banksy-esque work.
Like, yeah, it's double derivative, because it's like, you know, Andy Warhol's whole thing was just taking pop culture and just like giving it back to you. Yeah. That was his whole thing. And then Mr. Brainwash is just like doing that. He's just like, I'm just going to do stuff like Andy Warhol, which is like this double like fakery thing. Yeah. So the documentary is about how people start to believe the hype of Mr. Brainwash, and they start to think that his work is good. And the ending of the film, you know, you see this big gallery show that, in air quotes, Mr. Brainwash has put on, his big debut show, and all these pieces are selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there's lines around the block of people trying to get in, and, you know, they're interviewing all these people on the street who are, you know, they're like, what do you think of the work? And, you know, average everyday people is like, oh, it's so visionary. I can't believe that I was here. I'm so glad that I got to see this. It's something I'm going to tell my grandkids. And then they cut to Shepard Fairey, like, not that I think Shepard Fairey necessarily is the arbiter of good taste, but he's an artist people know. And he's like looking at the paintings and he's kind of like nodding his head, and the camera guy like walks up to him and he's like, hey, what do you think of the show? And he says something to the effect of like, yeah, it's a show. Yeah, it's a show. And like, because it's completely, the emperor has no clothes. But then the craziest part about this is that Mr. Brainwash ended up going on to be a very successsul artist and did he's still just a thing. Still doing it. Yeah. He did record covers for Madonna, like album art for Madonna. He's done a whole bunch of stuff. And he, you know, and then the conspiracy theory, which you're referencing is, or not conspiracy, the open secret that you're discussing is this documentary portrays Terry as a guy who genuinely wanted to become an artist. And then the movie is about how everyone in the art world is a charlatan and they've just accepted this guy in the emperor's new clothes style situation. But the kind of, if you read between the lines, this Terry guy is just a friend of Banksy's, and Banksy's like, I bet I could make anybody into a, in air quotes, famous artist. Yeah. I'm going to make a movie and turn this guy, the schlubbiest of the schlubs, into a world famous artist just to prove how stupid the fine art world is. And the movie doesn't necessarily end that way. So you could get something else out of it if you wanted to. But knowing Banksy and the people involved, I think it's just it's a fact that that's what it is. Like it's a critique of the system it's almost the anti-Duchampian critique, where it's the same critique but inverted because everybody believes that it is the exact same thing. Yeah. Movie's great. Love the movie. I've seen it like 6 times. It's awesome. But then again, I like I said previously, I love movies about like art theft and just general bullshit about how all the art world is bullshit. Yeah. I love it. Yeah, I mean, I love the movie too. I saw it in theaters a couple times and
highly recommended from the Deep Cuts boys. The DC nope. Boys? Nope, we're not doing it. Nope.
DC Boys.
DC Boys.
We'll circle back on that.
Yeah. We'll work out the branding. In 1974, a woman attacked the Mona Lisa with red spray paint in protest of what she felt was the museum's lack of effort to make the premises accessible to disabled folks. Obviously, the Mona Lisa is now the most famous painting in the world, even at one point hanging, at one point in its lifetime, it hung in Napoleon's bedroom, which is so weird. So ultimately, what happened to old Vinny P? Well, he got out of prison and then fell on financial hard times and enlisted in the military, where he served during World War I. He survived the war and returned home to marry and have a daughter. Ironically, the Italian folk hero moved back to France, where he worked for the rest of his life as a painting decorator, installing and framing works. He passed away on his actual birthday of October 8th, 1925, on his 44th birthday.
Rest of his life, in quotes.
Yeah, no shit, right?
He died like 3 seconds later.
Yeah. He was not widely written about during the immediate vicinity of his death. In fact, many of his obituaries even got the date of his death wrong. The irony in that is just so crazy that the
act that he committed made this piece of art the most famous painting in the world, and he was not given any recognition or historical observance.
Yeah, even if good or bad, even if it was,
he didn't go down as like the history's villain. He was just a guy.
Yeah,
that died.
It's so interesting because I feel like now, is the minute that guy died, there would be the complex legacy of Vinny P. think pieces on Vulture in like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
You know? Oh, you think Vinny P is a villain, but he's actually a hero. 10 reasons why when you click the link, you know? Like,
well, yeah, I mean, and going back to Exit Through the Gift Shop, it's like, it's crazy because, Banksy, if that is to be believed, Banksy did that, and he basically just manufactured a famous person or somebody that in some shape or form will be remembered in history.
Mm-hmm.
And he was right, because then you have stuff like the Tiger King, where it's like that guy is just now a national celebrity, and we're just gonna always remember that random dude.
He saw a tiger, and that tiger saw a man.
Yeah, and now and we'll remember that guy forever.
Yeah, it's really, really strange. It's kind of this weird. I feel like there's kind of like a parallaxing effect where, like, if you're on one of two sides, if you're either like incredibly virtuous and have, like a really high level of skill or are very dedicated to a craft to an extreme degree, you can excel, and the meritocracy will reward you in a certain sense. And then on the other hand, if you're a complete, utter piece of shit and you're the worst possible version of yourself, the novelty of that vileness also kind of like pulls you up through the system.
Yeah.
But if you're in the middle, you're fucked.
Yeah.
You can't be an asshole and really good, and you can't be really bad but very nice. You got to be on one of those two extremes. And if you are a crazy, vile, repugnant person, then you better be, really, 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 really good at what you do. There's also that version. There's the Roman Polanski version where it's like that guy keeps getting work because unfortunately he's a good director. And on that note, ad break. All right, Act 3, discussion, baby.
Discussion. Yeah, so they conducted this multi-year study that basically concluded that most famous artists are famous because of their friends and people that they know, as opposed to their actual art.
Yeah.
Contrary to conventional literature, there was no statistical support for the relationship between an artist's creativity and the fame that they ultimately achieved. That, once again, if you haven't already, add Exit to the Gift Shop to your streaming queue. That movie just defines the entire thing, where the import of a piece of fine art or a series of art or an artist is kind of like the simulacrum, where it's based off of nothing. It's like it's not to say that there isn't great art, but you know, it's kind of mutually exclusive. The relationship between a great piece of art and art becoming revered, not even made famous, but revered is great. And it just kind of, it springs out of some weird, out of nowhere ether where something just gets perceived in some way for some reason as great. And then it just becomes great because of that. And that's more important than whether the thing is great or not.
So I have two thoughts about that. And I'm going to talk for a second about Ed Burns, the filmmaker, and Francis Bacon, the painter. And trust me, it'll make sense, but I just wanted to set that up as I go through it. Okay. So Ed Burns started in the 90s with Tarantino and Kevin Smith and all those guys during the kind of like Miramax heyday of independent film in America. He self-funded a movie for like, you know, $20,000. He was working as an Entertainment Tonight PA and then at nights shooting this movie with his friends. I'm not actually a very big Ed Burns fan. I don't know why I read his book, but he wrote a biography, and I read the biography of him coming up through the indie film thing, being a studio actor, being in these big budget Hollywood movies with people like Robert De Niro and, you know, directing bigger movies. And then, you know, he had a TV show on TNT for a while that was like a, you know, cops and robbers noir style show that Steven Spielberg produced. So he was in that world for a hot minute. And one of the things that he was saying is there was like this desert period where nobody would touch him. He was in a couple big budget movies that had flopped, and none of his directorial stuff had gotten off the ground. So he kind of realized that in order to make something successful, in order to make a movie sell, you have to have two things. You need a story that's compelling, that the movie is telling. You know, you need two stories, basically. The movie's telling one story that's solid. It does what it's supposed to do. The mechanisms line up. You know, the acts connect to each other. And then on top of that story, you need a story about making the movie. So for all of these movies, he started self-financing movies for like $15,000, $10,000, $20,000, where he would hire local community theater actors and he would shoot them at his house on digital in like 2005. And he made, you know, 4 or 5 movies, and he got them on iTunes and he got them distributed. And every movie he would manufacture a story about the movie. Well, you got to see this new movie because this new movie is the first movie shot completely on digital cameras. Oh, well, you got to see this movie because this movie is the first movie to star an all geriatric cast of people who live in an old folks home. You got to see this movie because this is the first movie where everyone in the movie is an amputee. I'm just making those last couple up. Those aren't real. But you know, like you need to give a broader backdrop that's interesting and enticing, and then you use the thing you made as like the kind of like honeypot, the lure that allows people into whatever that narrative is. And I've been thinking a lot about Francis Bacon recently, and Francis Bacon, you know, was this renowned painter doing very disturbing horror-esque paintings throughout the, you know, mid 20th century. And they all revolve around like dismembered bodies and bizarre warping of facial features in a very kind of gothic and almost Cronenbergian body horror way. And he was a gay man who was sent away from his family because he was gay, and he was basically raised by a family friend, or a family friend. He was raised by a family friend who they thought was going to kind of like scare him straight. But the family friend turned out to be sexually interested in him. And so his like basically second dad started dating him when he was really young. And he had this really complex relationship with masochism and his own sexuality, where he was very self-loathing because his, you know, sexual proclivities weren't embraced in the time, and all of that feeds into the work. And if you took those paintings and divorced it from the story of the traumatic person, you know, there was a person that had all these traumatic things happen to them, even if the paintings were just as good, I don't think that they excel in the way that his career had just this meteoric rise throughout the, you know, from the 40s to the 70s, just huge amounts of money made. You know, he had, you know, the French government bought a painting from him. They gave him a fucking show. Like, the French government put a show on of his work. And he is a perfect example of the type of person that you're talking about, where he was friends with all of the right people at the right time, and also good enough at being a fun party guy, drowning his, sorrows in alcohol, that all of those things kind of dovetailed into exactly what we're talking about, where
and then you look at the painting and you know all that, and you're like, oh, I can see the pain.
Which is partly like completely fucking true, but also it's that same simulacrum thing where you're like, you're reading into the material more because you know who the person is that made it and their backstory. And like, they are very evocative, horrific paintings, but it just has a completely separate, almost three-dimensional nature once you have the cult of persona around it. And I think that's what's so interesting about the fine art world, both in a good and a bad way, in that it's not actually about craft 9 times out of 10. It's about who can perpetuate a cult of persona the best, which still happens today. And honestly, I wish that more figurative illustrators, and I don't just mean comics, although we both know everybody listening to this fucking podcast knows that I'm talking about comics, but like not literally just comics. I mean, just in general, figurative illustrators. I wish that they had more of that kind of flair for the theatricality and the embracing of a cult of personality and a narrative around their work that's not just, because in the fine art world, figurative illustration is looked down upon because it's not about anything other than, look how well I can render the human form. Look at me draw this hand, or look at me draw these feet. Like, there's not
some of them do in bad ways. Like a comic artist that will go unnamed that's becoming more famous now, despite having been in the industry for decades, because they've just revealed themselves as a transphobic piece of shit.
Wait, who the fuck? Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting though about how, and speaking of people on that end of the political spectrum, I really don't like anything that Comicsgate stands for. I think those guys suck. I think they're bigots. I think they're bad for everything, comics especially. And somebody who's really embraced that side of things, the kind of cult of personality, is Ethan Van Sciver, who's like the de facto head of the Comicsgate guys. Like, he fucking sucks. He's literally like making Nazi imagery. Like, his sketchbook is named My Struggle, and which, if you don't know, that's what Hitler's book was called. It was called Mein Kampf, that he wrote when he was in prison. And like, if you look at the cover to his sketchbook, like, Sinestro is flying with his hand outstretched and his hand is going off the composition, and it's basically in a Nazi salute. Now, you can say that he's being sarcastic and it's to trigger the libs, but people died. Like, why even go down that road if you don't want to deal with the consequences of that?
Yeah.
Fuck that dude. Fuck Ethan Van Sciver and fuck Comicsgate. Fuck those guys. But I just bring it up to say that is a very potent weaponization of these exact tactics that you're talking about, where there's a story behind the story. That's why, all of Ethan Van Sciver and all these guys are running these big Kickstarters and Indiegogo campaigns that are making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, because there are people on the internet who are each individually backing those campaigns for thousands of dollars, just out of a pure, I'm not actually backing this because I want to read the comic. That story isn't what's speaking to me. Yeah,
exactly. And not to say that none of them are talented, but they have a new fan base, or an old but newly old but newly galvanized fan base, specifically because of a narrative rather than the actual work. And it kind of goes both ways. You can support somebody for a narrative despite and that has nothing to do with their actual work, and you could also hate something or somebody based on a narrative that really doesn't have anything to do with them personally, kind of like just the universal hatred of that Greta von Thurberg, or whatever her name is.
Yeah.
Just for what she represents. You have horrible people online mercilessly bullying this young girl, not because of who she is specifically, not because of anything she does, but because of what she represents.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what's happening with the the Comicsgate movement is the far right end of the political spectrum. They have all these coded messages of like, we believe that comics should be apolitical, and we believe that consumers should come first, and we believe that comics should be good again, and we believe that we should just make comics that really just speak to the best of when comics were awesome in the 90s. What? What the fuck are you talking about? Comics shouldn't be political? You think Captain America isn't political? It's literally the first cover of the Captain America comics is him punching Hitler in the fucking face, you idiot.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, and also you saying that comics shouldn't be political, and like their slogan, if you've ever watched any of their YouTube channels videos, because there's like 6 guys who all make YouTube, they all run YouTube mini empires preaching hate, and their slogan is "Get woke, go broke."
Yeah, I mean that phrase has just like permeated. I hear a lot of people saying that.
Like, fuck you. Yeah. It's such double speak, both sides of the mouth talk where you're like, comics should be apolitical, but also progressive shit is terrible, and we want just kind of comics the way they used to be. So you mean progressive by 1960s standards? Like, what the fuck?
I've seen a lot of similar arguments about Star Wars and the original trilogy versus the new sequel trilogy. And whatever you think about those movies specifically, a lot of people hate them because of that same belief system. And I've seen a lot of similar arguments of people being like, these new Disney movies suck because they try to cram like a political message down your throat. And the original trilogy,
trilogy like, where the villains are literal space Nazis, wasn't political.
In a similar fashion to the Captain America, it's like, did you pay attention to the Star Wars movies, or did you just watch them as a little kid and then just at the time not realize what they were, and then you've been in that same mindset, in that nostalgic mindset as you've watched them over the years, to the point where you've never actually sat and like thought about what you were actually watching.
Yeah.
To see the like the so transparent imagery that it's like people fighting space Nazis, that it's just Nazis. Like,
and they literally, and in the emperor, the supreme leader, like these are all fascist terms, literally. Like, yeah.
And you want to tell me that the guy that made Red Tails wasn't trying to make a political statement?
No shit. Yeah, the guy that made THX 1138.
Yeah.
Really?
But yeah, it's the same thing. It was just like, you don't even. What do you mean? Like you liked this thing as a kid and then just never updated your filing system to like think about what things meant from an adult lens. Yeah,
like I am a part of many.
That's another thing with the Twilight Zone, the new Twilight Zone. Everyone's like, oh, it's too political. Like the original Twilight Zone wasn't political. What are you talking about? That was literally the point of the show. It existed to be political. That was the whole point of it.
Yeah. It's so funny how we as a culture, there's a certain percentage of the culture that's always living like 15 minutes in the past. And it's just like, no. I don't want to have to update. I just want to keep running on last year's OS.
The Langoliers.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. And the last bullet point here is, does craft have any place in the art world that's solely about narrative? And the answer is, it does for me, baby, but probably not for the wider public.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird how technically amazing art just never quite rises to the import of art that has this some kind of narrative crafted around it.
Yeah, and I think even when they do, like the technical achievement, if we're mixing and matching our mediums, like the technical achievements in things like Avatar or Star Wars or, you know, any of these big leaps forward just from a technological standpoint, 9 times out of 10, the stories are very simple and the narratives surrounding them are very simple. And it's framed to the public as, you need to see this because it's made so much money. Like, it's already been validated. It's not risky at all. You just need to see it because it's so much of a cultural touchstone.
Yeah. And also, like, you know, with Avatar, it's like, the 3D, you have to see it.
Yeah.
And like, you know, there was a whole world created in this 3D universe and all this stuff. And then like the artists, where it's like, it's a silent film.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the fine art world still has big stars that do massive shows and sell paintings for millions of dollars, but it doesn't have the same, you know, there's not the same, they don't occupy the same cultural space that they did 20, 30, 40 years ago, you know, like, you know, I can name 10, 15 people from even the 80s that were really big, specifically primarily known as visual artists. And like, as time goes on, obviously I can name a lot of people that are important to me that are big artists, but I don't know that my mom knows who Jenny Saville is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know that my mom knows who James Jean is, you know, where it's like, it's just not a thing that culturally we've replaced famous artists with the Kardashians now.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like most people in terms of like fine art, it's like, they know Thomas Kincaid. Maybe they know Georgia O'Keeffe,
Ansel Adams.
Yeah, and then like the classics, you know. But that's more of a historical thing, really, than an appreciation of art.
Yeah, it's just I'm aware that I am supposed to be able to say the words Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah,
and he made the Mona Lisa, which is the most famous painting of all time.
Yeah, and you aren't even introduced to Mona Lisa as a piece of art. You're introduced to it as a thing in pop culture. You're introduced to it like as there's an episode of Looney Tunes where Bugs Bunny jumps into the painting and like sits in her lap or something. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, that's how you're introduced to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the weird like hyper referential like it's so famous that it's never not there.
Yeah.
You know, in some ways like Star Wars or like, you know, the Beatles or, you know, NASA, you know, these kind of just like things that are around. Yeah. But it's pretty weird to me that I feel like a lot of the other aspects of these touchstone pillars in pop culture, they're more widely known. Like everybody knows the names of the 4 Beatles. Everyone roughly knows their story. Oh, they're from England. And then they went to Germany. They played in a shitty club. They got good. They took a bunch of drugs. They made music. And then they came to America and it became super popular. Like that's the beats of their story, right? But I don't know that everybody would be able to say like, oh yeah, it was painted for this, you know, Italian nobleman. And then it got taken by the French king. And then, you know, at one point, you know, Napoleon had it in his fucking bedroom and then it ended up at the Louvre and then this guy stole it. And then that's what really made it famous. Like, I don't think many people know the specifics of that. And it's evidence. It's evidence to the fact that like painting. I couldn't even pronounce the guy's name consistently. The guy who stole it. Like I can tell you Mark David Chapman's name.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this is basically a very similar story of like Vincenzo Pugera should have been, or Pugaria, how the fuck you pronounce his name? Vinny P. He should, this story should have the arc of he's the Mark David Chapman. He should die alone, despised. How dare you do this to one of our prized artistic human achievements? But literally nobody even gave a shit. They didn't even put him for prison for an entire year, 6 months. It's crazy.
Yeah. They were just like, what are you in here for again? Just get out of here.
Yeah, wait, what? Stealing a painting? Go home.
We need a cell for a real criminal.
Yeah, we got some rapists. You got to get out of here, boy. See you, buddy. And on that note, this has been Deep Cuts. I'm Dave Baker.
And I'm Andrew Price.
Please sub the show. You can find me online at heydavebaker.com, or you can find me on Instagram at xdavebakerx and on Twitter, drawing stuff. Posting lots of drawings and occasional snarky comments, but mostly honestly just drawings, really.
You can find me stapled to the wall of a museum by Banksy. And you can also find me at dapricerights.com.
And Robots in Comedy?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Robots in Comedy, the letter N.
Deep Cuts is a production by Boy Genius Media. If you'd like to find this show and others like it, please visit boygeniusmedia.com or deepcutspod.com.
If you want to join in on post-episode discussions, please join the Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook group. Finally, subscribe to our YouTube channel for additional video content.